Hello, Duhawks. Today's topic will be finishing up lecture 2. So I just kind of have some concluding remarks related to metabolism and the recovery window, and also some of the potential factors that are important for us to note as it relates to fatigue. So we ended, and there we go. We ended on our last session talking about fats and exercise, and we discussed some of the factors that would affect when fat is used for a major fuel source. And again, usage of fat is dependent on the exercise duration, the training status of the individual, and the intensity of the exercise, right? So again, the intensity needs to be moderate or low in order for us to use fats as a fuel. So our next topic that we want to kind of discuss is this idea of exercise recovery in the metabolic window. Okay, so again, essentially when we think about the metabolic window, what we're talking about is this amount of time that's about 30 to 45 minutes after exercise. And if we ingest the appropriate nutrients during this time frame, our muscle is put into an anabolic state. Again, anabolic means to build up. Again, maybe some of you are thinking like, well, shit, I don't care if I build muscle. Like, that's not really why I'm doing exercise, right? But when we think about anabolic state, we're not just talking about growing the muscle bigger. Okay, anabolic state also includes building back muscle mass that you might have damaged during that given exercise bout. So it's going to improve our recovery capacity. Okay, that's something that everyone should be able to buy into. Again, if I used to think like recovery was stupid. Like, who cares about recovery? Like, I want to do well during the event or during the performance. I don't care if I recover. But then I realized that if I can recover quickly from X event or X hard effort, right, I'm able to do something hard sooner, right? So I'm able to progress myself faster than maybe someone else. Okay, so recovery enhances our ability to do something quality sooner than maybe you would be able to otherwise. Okay, so again, when I consume nutrients during this metabolic window, I'm able to get myself in this anabolic state, which allows me to recover and repair muscle damage that I might have induced if the exercise bout was strenuous enough. Okay, so again, what should I consume during that time? I could consume proteins and carbohydrates, and I'll talk about those specifically here coming up. But if I don't do that, if I don't take carbohydrates within that particular window, and carbohydrates are not given until 2 hours after exercise, this is going to greatly reduce my rate of muscle glucose uptake and glycogen resynthesis. So again, remember that glycogen is that storage form of sugars, and resynthesis means like recreation basically of those glycogen molecules. Okay, so this is going to greatly reduce my ability to do so. Okay. Maybe you're thinking that, like, oh, I'm not an endurance person, so like, I don't really care about, like glycogen depletion, like that's not an issue for me, okay? Here is a study that gives you an example of just how applicable this might be for all of us, right? So this whole metabolic window helps, again, replenish the liver and muscle glycogen. For an example, we can reduce these sugar stores by up to 75% during a 3-hour cycling bout that's moderate intensity, 70%. Again, some of you are thinking like, I would never ride my bike for 3 hours, so I don't really care about that. Okay, fine. That's fine. However, these glycogen levels can also be reduced by about 40% with just 45 minutes of intense resistance training. Okay, again, something that maybe a lot of you do more frequently than ride your bike for 3 hours, right? So again, my thought process here is, this isn't just a statement that's important for endurance athletes to think about, but really anyone who's doing any type of strenuous exercise, this is going to help you recover faster so you can do more sooner. Okay, so here you see potential, Okay, so this is our potential ability to recover. Think of it that way. And again, we said within those 15 to 45 minutes post-exercise, that's the ideal time to consume those nutrients, right? And if I don't consume those nutrients within that first 45 minutes post-exercise, then you can see that window closing. And essentially, I'm losing the capacity to recover at that same speed as what I would if I just simply have a little snack post-exercise. Okay. Again, this metabolic window is a major key in enhancing recovery, which will allow us to improve at a faster rate, which would then allow us to have a greater potential to be better than someone else, right? Here's another research example to kind of, I guess, hit a home run for you in regards to how important this is. So when you think about recovery, if an individual is not fed following the exercise, okay, the rate of muscle glycogen resynthesis is around 2, let me write it for you. Let's see. That's a 2 millimoles per kilogram. Okay, that means nothing to you, right? However, if an individual is given carbohydrates, that's what CHO stands for. Immediately following exercise, that rate of resynthesis goes up to 20 to 45. Okay, so again, these numbers are not like super important. However, the difference in these numbers is super important. Look at this. More than 10 times greater recovery following exercise if I consume some carbohydrates versus if I don't, okay? So basically, our ability to resynthesize that glycogen is significantly enhanced if I eat within that metabolic window, within that 45 minutes post-exercise. And who doesn't like eating, right? This is a win-win. So in addition to consuming carbohydrates, and again, you don't need a whole lot of carbohydrates, you need about 200 calories worth or so, I can also consume protein at the same time. Protein co-ingestion means that I'm consuming it with carbohydrates, okay? So when a protein is consumed with carbohydrates during recovery, this might actually enhance the resynthesis of muscle glycogen. We believe that there's some sort of relationship between consuming carbs and proteins that will enhance the release of insulin post-exercise. And again, insulin is going to help us to store those sugars. So again, when consuming proteins, it's possible that that would enhance our ability to store more sugars. Additionally, protein is going to help us with the recovery process within the muscles themselves as well, right? So again, it's believed that if I were to, you can either do like the appropriate amount of carbs and resynthesize glycogen, or you can consume proteins and carbs, and they seem to be about equivalent. However, we know that protein is important for other reasons. So at the end of the day, I would advocate that protein and carbs together is actually significantly better than just the carbohydrates, because within the recovery process, I'm not just concerned with refilling my muscle glycogen. I also want to enhance recovery in other mechanisms as well. And let me talk to you about those here on the upcoming slides, okay? So this shows you the difference. Again, sorry, my slide's a little bit blurry here. This shows you some research that looks at, oops, sorry, I don't know why that did that. Plasma glucose response post-exercise. So here is when I consume just carbs, and here's when I consume carbs and proteins. Notice that my plasma glucose response is not significantly different in either scenario. Again, same thing over here when we look at post-exercise, carbohydrates shown in black versus carbs and proteins shown with the white circles. Again, not significantly different as it relates to plasma glucose levels. So again, when we're looking at our ability to resynthesize glycogen, it's not significantly different when I used carbs versus carbs and proteins. Again, alluding to some other points though, protein is important for other reasons, okay? So resistance exercise in particular can lead to muscle protein breakdown in the targeted muscles that you've activated. So anabolic activity can occur 24 to 48 hours post-exercise. I should really change this when we say resistance training leads to muscle protein breakdown. Any type of eccentric exercise is going to break down the targeted muscles, okay? So running downhill, doing sprints where you have to decelerate and change directions, okay? All of those are examples of when I'm doing eccentric activity that will result in muscle breakdown or protein breakdown, okay? Anabolic activity will occur 24 to 48 hours post any of those types of exercise, right? So again, resistance training or any type of change of direction that requires agility and eccentric action will elicit a significant amount of muscle damage. So consuming proteins during that recovery window will help in a few other ways as well. Okay, so number one, it's going to help with muscle repair, and number two, it's going to help with adaptation to training. Okay, so again, when we think about this anabolic ability to build up, right, this could be due to greater synthesis of amino acids. Okay, so again, important for us to consume those proteins so that we can build up back to where we were before. But not just that, right? It's not enough for me to just get back to what I was before. Like I want to get better, right? I want to continue to improve. And so therefore, this consumption of proteins is going to help us to adapt to that training and build ourselves back more efficiently and a little bit stronger than what we were previously. Okay. How much protein do we need? We need about 20 grams of protein during this recovery window in order to maximize the synthetic rate within the muscle. Okay, that's not very much. That's only 80 calories, right? That is not very much. Anyone can do that. Okay, and when we think about how many calories of carbohydrates, we need about 200 calories or so. So I think it's like 50 to 75 grams of carbohydrates is appropriate and 20 grams of protein during this particular time. Okay. So again, you're looking at a grand total of 300 calories, right? That's a snack. You can easily achieve that. Okay. And again, when we think about these components, I want you to critically think, like, is it important for me to use my metabolic window every single time I work out? Do I need those 300 calories every single time that I do a workout? And the answer is no. Okay. Again, am I eliciting muscle damage every single time I work out? Hopefully not. You're probably not doing it right if you are, right? That's going to lead to overtraining very, very quickly. Okay. You need to have some recovery days built in. So when we think about this metabolic window, it's important for us to really focus on those exercise sessions that are super strenuous, those exercise sessions that are going to challenge us as it relates to, muscle breakdown and things like that. Okay. So focus on hitting this metabolic window in those scenarios, right? When you're doing your hard workouts and you are, eliciting muscle damage. Okay. It doesn't have to be every single, oh, I did 30 minutes of yoga. Okay. I'm going to have, 300 calories. Like, no, you're probably going to gain weight if you do that, right? Because you're not even burning 300 calories during the exercise bout. So again, we've got to be mindful of, what type of exercise will require us to utilize this metabolic window in order for us to kind of maximize that recovery process. Okay, one last kind of thought when we think about metabolism and these metabolic pathways and what limits us during exercise, right? So a huge I think a huge piece of understanding exercise physiology is understanding what separates us as elite athletes versus non-elite athletes, okay? And one of those things is fatigue, right? The reason that someone is faster than me in a race might be because I got fatigued before they did, okay? The reason that someone is able to, I'm trying to think of another example, make more free throws than me could be because I'm tired by the time we get to the end of the game, and so therefore I'm not as accurate with my free throw shooting, okay? So think about how fatigue might apply to a variety of sports and athletic scenarios, and how that might affect your ability to perform, okay? There are some sports where fatigue is a non-issue, okay? Let me think of some examples. Golf, for example. Fatigue should be a non-issue. That is an accuracy sport, so it's all about coordination and technique and accuracy, okay? Maybe some of those anaerobic sports that don't really challenge our metabolic systems would be another example, okay? Again, I would doubt doing high jump, that fatigue is what's going to limit me from not jumping as high as someone else, right? There's other factors that are going to be important. It's going to be more about my ability to produce power and coordination and have the skill associated with appropriate technique, okay? So again, when we think about some of those technique-driven sports, fatigue's not a huge issue, right? But fatigue can be really important in many scenarios, okay? So again, thinking about if fatigue is a factor that separates an elite athlete from a non-elite athlete, we need to look at what are the potential causes, what causes us to feel fatigued, okay? So as these relate to this lecture, as these relate to metabolism, let's first start by thinking about energy depletion, okay? Is it possible that I ran out of fuel, okay? And in what scenarios might that be possible? So again, if I'm utilizing or relying on that first of the energy systems, the ATP phosphocreatine system, okay, it's possible that I deplete myself of phosphocreatine, right? So again, I want you to think about specific athletic events that utilize the ATP phosphocreatine system, okay? Throwing shot put, playing football, 100-meter dash, okay, some of the shorter events in swimming, okay? Those are all examples of baseball, softball. Those are all examples of sports that are highly reliant on this particular system, okay? Now I want you to think about the demands of some of those sports, whether it be softball, baseball, you know, throwing the shot put, what you might know about football, etc. And I want you to think about the potential for you to run out of energy. Is that what limits you? Okay. When I throw the shot put, for example, again, keep in mind that this system maxes out at about 12 seconds, 10 to 12 seconds-ish. Okay. It probably takes me 4 seconds or so to complete a shot put throw. Okay. So it is highly unlikely that in that event, depletion of this fuel source is what limits me, right? I'm not too fatigued, and that's why somebody was able to throw further than me, okay? So even though I'm using that energy system, we've got to think about the types of sports that are going to max out that energy system. Again, if I think about baseball or softball, for example, my ability to hit the ball isn't dependent on whether or not I'm fatigued, right? It has to do with my coordination and skill associated with knowing where the ball is and knowing how to put my bat there at the appropriate time, okay? Additionally, if I want to run to first base, it ain't going to take me 12 seconds or I'm not going to be very good at softball or baseball anyway, right? So again, when we think about depletion of a fuel source, it's highly unlikely that that is a limiting factor for me in a sport such as baseball or softball, right? So now I want you to think about a sport or an event such as the 100-meter dash, okay? As a female, maybe it takes me 13 seconds to run a 100-meter dash, okay? Phosphocreatine depletion is absolutely a limiting factor then, right? If I can only go 12 seconds using that energy source, then I have a whole second where I'm in a different, slower energy source. That's limiting me. Okay, so I've ran out of this fuel, and so therefore I have to kick back to the next slowest version of that fuel. Okay, so again, those are some examples when we think about energy depletion as it relates to that phosphocreatine system. Okay, next thing I want you to think about is glycogen depletion. Okay, so we said glycogen was going to, hang on. Sorry, back to business here. Okay, so glycogen depletion. So again, we have enough glycogen stored to last us, it's about 2,000 calories. So again, depending on the individual, that could be 2 hours, 20 minutes, something along those lines. So when we think about glycogen depletion as a cause of fatigue, we got to do something pretty long in order for that to happen, right? So again, I need to be exercising longer than an hour at high intensity for sure. It might affect maybe a college soccer player if they are like a midfielder that's doing a lot of running and you're in that 90 minutes, that it might be an issue for that person. But otherwise, in terms of college sports, like probably not an issue for us. We would see this most likely like in wrestling though. However, just simply based off of them cutting weight. So again, if they don't fuel themselves appropriately immediately following the weight cut, that can become an issue. Not because they used 2,000 calories worth of glycogen, but because they didn't have much stored beforehand because they were trying to cut weight. So we might see glycogen depletion as an issue in that particular sport. Really the major time we're going to see glycogen depletion is some of those endurance things. So marathon, for example, average person 3 to 4 hours, somewhere in that range, or a triathlon, for example, where some of those shorter races might be 1 to 4 hours, something along those lines. So again, when we're thinking about that 2-hour mark in terms of continuous exercise, glycogen depletion might become an issue. Okay. Fat depletion, would fat depletion ever become an issue for us as it relates to fatigue? No. Again, 70,000 calories of fat stored. I could run continuously for like 48 hours without stopping if I could just use fat. Okay. However, something else is going to stop me before I run out of fat, right? And remember that fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. So if you remember back to the Krebs cycle, and we had to have the carbohydrates in order to make fat burn, right? So going back to, we've got to have the glycogen in order to make fats burn anyway. So again, glycogen depletion is significantly more of an issue in endurance sports in comparison to fat depletion. That's probably not an issue for us. Okay. So again, those are our potential options in regards to energy depletion. Again, not every sport we're going to see energy depletion as a limiting factor for us or causing us fatigue. Okay. Other scenarios as it relates to metabolism that are going to cause fatigue are going to be the buildup of waste products, okay, or the accumulation of metabolic byproducts. Okay. One metabolic byproduct that I could potentially see limit me is inorganic phosphate, and that'll be related to that ATP phosphocreatine system. Okay, so the buildup of inorganic phosphate can become an issue for me if I'm doing, some of those high power activities for a short duration. Football potentially, maybe something in the weight room, for example, would be some examples there. Heat and muscle temperature, again, this could be environmentally related, but also related to a high metabolic activity. So again, we know that heat is a byproduct of metabolism. So overheating can become a major issue for us in many different exercise scenarios. Okay. And then lactic acid and hydrogen ions, again, that would be related to that middle or that intermediate of the energy systems, that anaerobic glycolytic system. And again, we'll see those in events that are kind of topping out that middle or that intermediate system. So things that are lasting 90 seconds to 2 minutes in duration. Lots of events in track and field. So like the 400 hurdles, 800, all of those events where you know, we're kind of reaching that top edge of that particular system. We see a large amount of hydrogen ion buildup that causes like that burning sensation in your legs or arms or wherever, right? If you've ever experienced that, where you're like, it's kind of like a nightmare, like you're going and you're going and you're going and you want to keep going really hard and you can't go any faster because everything is burning. That's hydrogen ions. And again, the reason that hydrogen is bad is it has a negative impact on the acidity within the muscles or within the blood. And so as I increase acidity within the body, that's a major threat for me. And so therefore it decreases my capacity to do work. Okay. So again, those are just some examples of how our performance is affected by fatigue specific to the metabolic systems, right? So again, energy depletion, I ran out of fuel or I had too much waste product built up, okay? So again, those are kind of the two potential issues that we see with fatigue. Okay, I think that's it for today. I think that's pretty short, but that's okay, right? I hope you guys have a great day. We will be continuing to work on that metabolic lab, and let me know if you have any questions. Have a great day.